Welcome to Socializing Security, where every week we have a discussion about security, compliance, and beyond.
Our goal is to learn and grow by socializing each week's topic with each other, our guests, and with you.
A quick compliance note, this podcast is meant for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal or regulatory advice.
We're glad you've joined us, and we hope you'll learn along with us. And welcome back to another episode of Socializing Security. We are excited to have you all back as we move through the year 2026. We're, over halfway done with it. Holy cow. Milou, how are you?
Good. Looking forward to our conversation today. We're talking AI, which we try to avoid bringing it up too often, but today we're going to focus pretty heavily on it.
Yeah, we're going to lean all the way in, but in the nature of the fact that it's everywhere. You can't avoid it. So we might as well talk about it. And I think one of the most productive conversations we can have about it is to kind of try to put it into perspective for people, particularly in situations where, when AI should be involved and when maybe it shouldn't be involved. So we've got kind of three perspectives on the thing that I think we want to talk through. Really with the concept of, we got a lot of concerns with how AI can be used. We both have personal stories that we've shared in the past about where it can lead to, and I think some of those will come out as we go along here. But the first one really ends up being, when you put information out there publicly, at this stage, you really should assume that anything you've put out there and anything you will put out there will get hoovered up into some sort of AI model. Could be used for training, could be used for just general reasoning. Because it's public. Like there's no lack of examples of AI models being trained on public data, whether they should have or not. There are definitely lawsuits going on out there about whether they should have used public information or not. So in my opinion, and I guess we'll start here, in my opinion, the horse has completely left the barn on this one. There's no hope for any of us when it comes to information we put out there in the public. If there's a camera pointed at us and it's getting recorded, or we post something on social media, you just have to assume that is at some way, shape, or form going to be used to train AI or to be used in somebody's answer when they ask a question of AI. Milou, your perspective.
Yeah, I think for the most part, we can assume that if the information has been posted online in some way, especially through social media, we can assume that is being consumed by models and that is being digested by various AI tools. So we can definitely assume that information has been processed by those tools. And unfortunately, there's no way to opt out of that. They updated the terms of service as you were using the solution. So honestly, I think even if they had updated the terms of service and you had deleted your account at that point, I still think the historical data probably would have been used to train their models regardless.
Yeah, that's the scary thing. Even if you read the terms of service, sometimes, I don't want to say it doesn't matter because it is a legally binding document on both ends. But sometimes they get changed in ways that us mere mortals can't always understand.
Mm-hmm.
I know I've tried to read the terms of service when I get that email. It says, hey, we're changing the terms of service. And after a little while, I get lost and say, this is kind of pointless. This isn't worth my time. I'll just have to trust the platform or delete my account on the platform, whatever it might be. And we've definitely talked about the fact that even if you delete your information and kill your account, whatever, that doesn't mean that it goes away. It's still out there and could potentially be resuscitated by somebody. It could still be out on the platform. Somebody may have screenshotted it, that kind of thing. Like nothing truly ever goes away, even if the platform is designed to make it look like it is. So yeah, this can definitely be a challenge, especially if you want to be part of a community. I know people who have completely eliminated a social media platform, and then they want to get involved in some sort of community group. And lo and behold, that community group only exists and only communicates on that particular social media platform, and therefore they've got to sign up again and use it. And in those cases, they very much limit it to, I'm only going to connect with people in this community. I'm only going to interact with people in this community. I'm not going to use it for connecting with with friends or coworkers or participating in any sort of marketplaces. It's just for this one use case. I also know people that will go to the extent of VPNs and other things to protect that identity being tied back to them directly, which can be hard with a community. If you want to be a part of a community, you kind of have to be yourself to some extent. So, so really, I guess, Milou, I want to ask this a few different questions at the end of each of these sections. Like, really, how much choice do we have when it comes to social media, public forums? Like, do we really get any choice other than be a part of a community that's on this platform, or don't be a part of that community?
I think our choice to like opt into the AI processing that's taking place, I don't really think we have a choice. I think it's very much like if your information was already on the platform and you had already consented to the terms of service, if the information was already there, we can pretty much assume that it was used to train their models. I think it's something to be said that it is something that you should consider looking at if you're looking at new tooling and looking at like responsible AI disclosure policies and practices. Like most companies at this point should probably have a statement online that you can review of like how they're using AI and how they're doing it responsibly, and hopefully that there's like a human in the loop and it's not just AI making decisions without people actually being able to review those decisions. I think I think for the most part, again, if that information had been made available online on different social media sites, we can definitely assume that it's been trained in those models. So I think choice, I don't really think you have a choice to opt out of it at this point. I think for the most part, if your information was there, we can assume that it's being used. Again, I think even if you deleted your information now, the historical information would have already been in the model.
Yeah, I'm generally going to agree with that. And again, in a public forum, there's really no decision as to whether it's being used or not. You just have to assume it is, or somebody is going to pull that information out of that platform and use it. Because once it's public, anybody can grab it and do things with it. We see that all the time with cross posts between social media sites. As an individual, and maybe as as part of a business, like if I'm working with customer information, maybe not directly with the social media, because you should never take customer information and put it into social media, unless everybody has blessed that. I guess what should we as individuals be considering as both our own people that have loved ones and friends that we care about and may potentially, become an attack vector or inadvertently share information, or as, individuals within a community or a business, what are the legal compliance considerations that we should think about? I mean, that's a whole episode on its own. But just kind of the high points of it is like, is there anything we should consider? And if there are, what are the maybe top two things that we should be thinking about as we use these kind of public type tools?
I think it's important to limit the information that you're then sharing on these tools. I think we can be a little bit more mindful that we're sharing less information than we may have in the past. I think being mindful of what information, and I think, again, trying to share less information is the game of who can share less at this point, I think, from a privacy perspective. So I think it's being mindful of how little information you can share, while still, of course, getting the benefits and advantage of the tool that you're using. Um, and then, yeah, I mean, again, I would say I would look for their data sharing and data privacy practices. Realistically, are we going to read the terms of service? Probably not. Should we? Yes, but um, I would say just like looking at their responsible usage statements to figuring out like how they're using AI responsibly, I think is really important.
Okay. So yeah, it's the wild, wild west, and as we've said many times, just be careful about what you put out there. The last thing I'll throw out there, unless you have any other thoughts, is, you may share a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit somewhere else, but it's pretty easy with AI these days to connect those dots and put those things together. So if I only share my house number on one platform and my street name on another and my town in another, AI sucking up all three of those and knowing, if they can connect me, they can connect those three pieces of information and put together my whole address. So it's not about what little you can share in a given post or a given thing, but across everything, those things can be put together pretty easily. We've seen this with sites that collect information about us and being able to say, hey, this person's going to a different house every day after work. That's a little suspicious, and being able to connect who we are, even though that data is anonymous. It's kind of crazy. And that was pre-AI when those types of things were happening. So a lot of crazy stuff there. Okay, so let's move on to a different way in which AI kind of shows up in our lives. And that is kind of, there's two parts to it, is those individual tools that we have. I can choose to use AI, AI specific tool. Hey, I'm going to plan my summer vacation. I'm going to go to a Claude, a ChatGPT, a Gemini, and I'm going to ask them a bunch of questions, give them a bunch of details about who I'm vacationing with, and, potentially personal details about where they live, where they're coming from, what their preferences are, what their allergies are, those types of things. The other category ends up being tools that maybe we use that have AI functions and features in them. So for example, I do a lot of photography. And so using photo editing, using photo management tools, AI is potentially a really huge advantage in those tools, because the ability to process those images, massive amounts of images, and to help to create sense of those or to clean them up and make them look better. Like, those are AI tools that have shown up in some of the tools I use for photography. And I'm like, I kind of like that. That is a use of AI I can get behind. But of course, things are not always as simple as they look on the surface. We can throw all those details into an AI agent, an AI tool, and someone else on the back end is reading those chats or collecting that information somehow. Same thing with, all my photos are being uploaded up to an AI in the cloud potentially. And this, I guess that's another variation. Is it something local on your machine, or is it something that's using something outside of your direct control? So I guess, Milou, I throw it to you. What are your thoughts around that? How much control do we have in situations like that, where we can control, as individuals, we can control the tools. We may not be able to control how that data is used on the back end.
It's a tough one, because ultimately, again, I think it has to, we have to be comfortable with what information we're sharing, knowing too that very often companies aren't that clear on how they're using certain tools or how they're processing information. So with the photography example, again, the benefit of being able to edit your photos using AI, there's a huge advantage to that. And it makes, for example, for us, for editing the podcast, AI makes it so much easier for us to do that. And that's something that you and I have easily agreed to, of being yep, that's worth it for us, because it makes it easier for us to be able to deliver content. Knowing though, we're training their model and all of the information is going in there. So it's one of those, yeah, if you're hesitant about what they're doing with it, you can inquire a little bit more and dive into their practices. But ultimately, at the end of the day, if you're consenting to uploading the information to the tool, at that point, it's pretty much out of your hands.
So are there any tricks that you use to kind of dig into, what type of AI is being used, what your data could be getting used for? Because you may not be using an AI feature and they still are collecting your data somehow and using it for AI. So what are telltale signs that we should look for, that should cause us concern, is maybe the better way to put that.
Oh, I don't know about the causing concern. Again, as much as I would say I would look up for their data practices, I would also, a good place to look too is for companies like sub-processors, because that's where they should be pretty clear on who they're actually using for their AI vendors. That's where they should pretty clearly tell you who they're using. But again, knowing who they're using versus how they're using it are two different things, right? Of understanding, okay, we're uploading it into ChatGPT, or we're doing something in a model. It with OpenAI is very different of understanding what they're actually doing with the data set. Man, I hate to say it, I think it's so limiting of like what you can actually like object to at this point. Just like by virtue of use of the software, you're pretty much agreeing to it. Because
What
yeah,
about
you. Mm?
when they give you the option to turn on or turn off a feature? Like if they give me the option to turn it off, don't use AI to do this. Should I feel comfortable that they actually won't use AI in that situation, or is that
I think
potentially
so.
yeah?
Yeah, I think if there's an option where they're either asking you like, "Hey, we don't like you don't want to use this data to train a model," or "Hey, like we want to be able to like turn off this functionality," I think that's where you should be able to trust that the company's actually following what they're saying they're doing at that point.
Because
Do
there
you
are
agree?
legal ramifications if they don't, right? Especially if it's in a terms of service type situation.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. I think it'd be hard to figure that out if they had actually violated that though.
Yeah, well, law's only as good as its enforcement type of situation. Sometimes it's just not possible to know what's going on behind the scenes. Um, and, I guess that gets to the point of, if I want to use AI to help me plan that vacation, which AI do I choose? Um, Obviously, the reputation of the company can make a big difference. And I won't point to any fingers to any particular situations on that front, but I do definitely have certain AI companies I trust more than others because of the way they go about doing business, because of the way that they have dealt with other companies or have changed their business over time as they've gotten bigger. I think are, to me, signs that I look at as to who I would trust with my data. And even then, I'm still cautious about what I throw in there. Um, so I guess how much is that much of a factor for you as to which companies to work with?
I think reputational risk, yeah, I think like how they're handling their data practices, I think is important and how they're respecting privacy and understanding like their responsibility of actually like maintaining information as private. I think is important. I wouldn't necessarily use a tool that isn't like widely known. I think at this point, um, I'd be mindful of like which tools you're putting your data into at this point. But yeah, I think the larger ones are probably the safer ones at this point, just because they're regulated a little bit differently and their reporting requirements are more severe and stricter.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, a hot topic these days is sovereignty. So, knowing where your data may be stored and who may, from a governmental perspective, be able to access that is worth considering as well, especially if you're outside the United States, is where most of that concern tends to come from. So yeah, you've got choice. Like you can choose to use certain tools. You don't necessarily have to use the tools that your friends are using in most of these cases. So you do have a bit more flexibility, a little bit more on each of us to figure out what's going on and whether the features are worth it, type of thing.
Okay.
Um, you know, I guess similar question as to last time. What other legal compliance considerations should we put onto as we choose a tool set, or we choose to continue using a tool set that maybe had something added that we're not entirely comfortable with?
I mean, I think it's similar to how I answered it earlier. I think it's like being mindful of their data privacy practices and understanding like, do they have a responsible usage statement? And I also think if there are certain features that you can turn off, like looking into what those things are and seeing if you do want to disable those, just to be more mindful of how your information is being shared. Unfortunately, I think it's up to us though. I think the like onus is and like the pressure is on us to actually be able to like vet those, which is tough. Like it's hard to put that on the consumer, I think, instead of the company being the one to be mindful of it.
Yeah. I mean, personally, I'm a fan of stronger consumer protections because there's just too much for us as individuals to ever digest across all of those decision points we have with every single tool that we use. Like, is it on me to make sure that that table saw I go and buy is going to be safe, or are we going to put in controls to ensure that no table saw that is unsafe ever gets sold? Um, I've got pretty strong feelings on that front, but that's not always the way our society works. Okay, so kind of that third piece ends up being where AI is a third party, where we as individuals aren't making the choice, but someone else is making a decision that they're going to use AI. So this can commonly happen, like if I log into Zoom or some other, telepresence type of software, and it gives us that warning that says, hey, the note-taking tool is on, and someone's using AI to create a summary of this meeting. I didn't make that decision. Someone else did. There's you've talked about doctors' offices having AI tools being used, um, which, yeah, it becomes this is probably the most difficult, which is why I kind of put it as the last one to talk about, because it is by far the most complex. Um, so I guess from that perspective, in these situations, general rules. When do you as an individual have a choice as to when AI is being used, when someone else is the one that's turning it on or using it or taking your data and using it within an AI application?
I mean, I think with the note-taking example, right, for me, I think it's very much like, what is the meeting about? Like, is it something that's sensitive enough that it shouldn't be in somebody else's notes that you don't have control over it? I think at that point you should object to it and just ask them to, you know, turn it off or, eject them out of the meeting. I think it's being mindful of like what conversations actually being like taken. In that, I think the doctor's office example is a good one because this is where I would definitely encourage folks to opt out of the usage of AI, just considering your health information is so sensitive. That's the example where your doctor is using a note-taking tool or some AI agent that's recording the conversation in the room, so it's making them easier for them to take their notes. Um, Again, while it's super valuable, I'm sure, for the business of it, making it easier for the doctors to take those notes and actually process that information and making that like an easier process for them. I would say again, like I personally would probably object to that and ask them to turn it off just because like I would prefer that information just get manually uploaded and isn't recorded in any way just because that to me is some of the most sensitive information we have.
How do you split the difference between a doctor using, or anybody, any business relationship, using AI to transcribe and summarize, as opposed to that person then immediately after talking to you taking notes and putting it into maybe the same system they would on the back end? So for like a doctor to be in some sort of electronic health records, um, where they may store this exact same sensitive information that the AI would have put into that summary. Like, is there a big difference between those two for you?
I think it's the recording of the conversation that I would have issue to. I think that like takes it a little bit of a step further as opposed to the doctor just like taking notes of what's going on in the situation. I agree with you. I would assume it is probably the same tool. But I think it's the type of information that's getting put into it. Um, Doctor's notes as opposed to like a recording of the conversation, the patient's interaction with the doctor. To me, it just seems like one step further of like if that information was exposed in some way, like that could be really uncomfortable for somebody.
Yeah. The benefit to the doctor on the back end becomes the danger for the wrong person getting that information.
Yeah, and for the most part, like they are obligated to let you know that they're doing it, and they are obligated also to follow your request if you want to opt out of that for that particular use case.
So in those cases, you do have the right to say no to that. I guess I think about this similar to like the recording laws. Like some states, only one party has to be aware of the fact it's being recorded and they can record
Okay.
it. Some states, both parties have to agree to be recorded. Is there anything on the books with AI in that regard that you're aware of? Obviously, you don't know the laws of every single state. I'll caveat that for you.
Yeah, not yet, but I mean, it's an interesting question because the question really comes around of like, is someone recording your information and putting it into an AI tool the same as like somebody recording a conversation? I think it's a little bit different. There's like an additional layer of processing that's happening, but it would be interesting if that followed the single party consent of somebody not having to opt into it. I mean, there's nothing stopping someone, right, from like recording a conversation regardless of whether or not it's being like clearly displayed in the Zoom or not, right? Like somebody could still just be recording the conversation locally.
Yep.
That'll be interesting to see and follow that to see how that kind of builds out in case law of will that kind of get built out. with individuals of, do they have to explicitly opt into being recorded, or is that going to be like follow that single party consent?
Be written on that front. Similarly, is there any requirements for a doctor, a business partner, having to tell you and giving you the option that AI is being used? So let's say I jump on even a community type call. Let's take it to the most simplest, maybe not simplest, but least likely to happen. I jump onto a call that, let's say it's a political party conversation, and they, somebody's using the AI features on the telepresence platform. Are they required to tell me that they're doing that and giving me the option to say no to it? And I guess similarly, if there's like 10 people on there, if one person objects, does it get turned off for everybody?
I think the answer is if one person objects, yes, it gets turned off for everybody. Are they obligated to tell you in the first place? I'm not sure. I think they should, but I'm not sure that they're technically required to.
We're not talking ethics. We're talking legal right now.
As scary as that is, should they? Yes. Are they required to? I'm not actually sure. Like, are they required to tell you that they're using something? I'm not sure that they are. They absolutely should, in my professional opinion, but are they required to? I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Should they?
Yeah.
Yes.
The crazy legal situation of an emerging technology.
Yeah, for sure.
There's an
But for
element
me,
of
ultimately, at the end of the day, when it comes into opting out, again, for me, it's the sensitive information. So, like, where the platform is really processing very sensitive information, whether that's financial information or health data or stuff like that, I would try to see if you can opt out. I think that's where it really becomes a matter that's worth fighting for the protection of that information.
Yeah, and I would generally agree with that. So when it comes to the opt-in, opt-out aspect of things, should we assume that the default is that we're going to get opted in unless we say otherwise? Or should we always go in assuming that if they don't ask me, then they probably aren't using AI?
I would assume it is an opt-in, like automatic, that it's automatically being opted in. Um, and I do think a lot of companies, whether or not they're using it right now, I think they probably intend to use it in the future.
Yeah. So even if a platform or tool you're using now doesn't have AI in it, assume anything you put into it could potentially become material for an AI, correct?
Mhm. Yeah.
Cool.
Not a
Doesn't
lot
make
we
me feel
can
great.
do, unfortunately.
Yeah. Yeah, that's unfortunately where I figured we'd end up at, which is, all you can do is try to put the minimum amount of stuff out there, call it a loss with whatever you already had put out there. It's a bit of the cybersecurity space is assume breach. Like you can't fully defend anymore. So make sure that you only putting things out there that you can afford to have people see, or potentially use against you. Is unfortunately the hard truth of things. And just try to limit what is out there. I think I've said it before, but my rule with social media, particularly the public ones, is I never really talk about my kids. I talk about the fact I have kids, but I don't know that anybody that only knows me on social media would know how many kids or what genders or ages or anything like that. Do they know that my kids live in my house or do they live with the next spouse? Hopefully nobody that only knows me on social media knows the answers to any of those questions, because that's always been kind of my goal. And fortunately, that was my goal pre-AI, because again, it's all privacy at this point. We've talked a lot about how do you stay private, and that's that the rules don't change with AI. The implications and things like, hey, if you drop parts of your address in different platforms, it's gotten a lot easier to tie them together. But putting them out there still was something from a privacy perspective you probably should have reconsidered. So, yeah, closing thoughts, Milou?
Yeah, be mindful of what you're sharing and look into the data privacy practices and try to limit information as much as possible. And it's
Fi-
okay to say no at the doctor's office.
you have agency. It's always okay to say no. It may mean that you lose a doctor, don't get to be on that platform with your friends, whatever that might be. So you got to balance the consequences. But such is life these days. So with that, thank you all for joining us. Hopefully this was a good conversation for you all. It's one that we've had on the list for a while, and I think we both just kind of wanted to feel how things were moving before we really dove into it. So definitely a thought exercise. Things can definitely change, and we'd love to hear your feedback on it. info@socializingsecurity.com. Let us know what you think, or post it under LinkedIn posts or YouTube posts, wherever you feel comfortable putting that feedback. We're happy to take it. But until next time, we appreciate you all, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks all.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Socializing Security. We hope you learned a thing or two with us.
If you'd like to continue socializing with us on this topic or have feedback, we'd love to hear from you on LinkedIn or social media. Just search for Socializing Security. Or you can email us at info@socializingsecurity.com.
Until next time, stay social and stay secure.